Hello, nerds, and welcome to the last pack of our leader pass for Civilization 6. It's been fantastic dissecting all these new leaders and giving some of our first impressions for all of them. Today we are talking about the new Rulers of England pack with, of course, Elizabeth I of England and Victoria, Age of Steam, now as a alternate persona of Victoria, Age of Empire. We'll save Varangian Herald of Norway for another video, as he was as much a ruler of England as Ludwig II was a great builder. So, but today we have plenty enough to talk about England and how they work with all of their new leaders, since now they have 4 different leaders, each of them synergizing a little bit with a different part of their kit. We can first start talking about England as a whole, and for those who don't know, England is a fantastic late game ramp civ. Old England, or specifically now Age of Empire Victoria, has always been very much a generalist civ in a lot of situations. A little bit of naval superiority, a little bit of colonization, a little bit of late game boost, and she was really good on both the sea and the land, and England's ability as a whole boosts you in any late game victory condition. We're going to ignore England's old ability here, British Museum, because this was the 2016 original version of England before Gathering Storm and Rise and Fall and all the DLCs, which made her incredibly strong tourism civ, because British Museum, each archaeological museum can hold up to 6 artifacts instead of the original 3 and build 2 archaeologists instead of just 1. And all archaeological museums are automatically themed when they have 6 artifacts. This is really strong. This is really strong. Made England a really big tourism civ, but also required a lot of colonizing and taking over other people's land to try to gain access to as much land as possible to get all those archaeologists. Or just build Terracotta Army, which allows all of your archaeologists to go into enemies' lands without open borders, and then just steal it from underneath their nose anyways, regardless of whether or not they hate you for doing so. England's been reworked since then, but hey, you can always try it out in vanilla and let me know what you think, because this is the one thing that would make me want to play vanilla, just because this ability is just very different and very fun, and is an interesting tourism England, kind of like Eleanor up here. Oh my god, if it had British Museum Eleanor, that would be ridiculous. That being said, forget about all of this, because England's actual ability nowadays is called Workshop the World, and this is a mouthful, so we'll break it down one at a time, but basically it's a lot of little production boosts that all synergize together and can actually become really powerful. So first of all, your iron and coal mines give an additional 2 resources per turn, which is in effect doubling the amount of resources that you'll be getting, since every improved resource usually only gives you 2. So when you build an iron mine, usually you're getting 2 iron per turn, but for England it's going to be 4 iron per turn. This usually works out pretty well, because if you're familiar with spawn biases, you'll see that England here has a tier 3 coastal spawn bias and a tier 5 coal and iron spawn bias. This means that the game will try to play you on the coast first, and if you can find a spot on the coast with these resources, then it will. On top of that, your harbor buildings grant you an additional plus 10 strategic resource stockpiles for every building inside your harbor. If you don't know, you can usually only hold 50 initially of any type of strategic resource. However, every time you build a building inside of an encampment, like a barracks, armory, or military academy, you'll get another 10 per building that you build. So one encampment can bring you all the way up to 80 stockpile, 2 encampments can bring you up to 110, so on and so forth. This of course is important in militaristic games when you need large armies, but this is also why you'll see people build encampments even in peaceful science games, so the players have the stockpile of aluminum for space-based products late into the game. I don't usually build a lot of encampments in my games, only a few just to get some general points and a little bit more for stockpile, but with England, you get these stockpiles with your harbors. I build a harbor in almost every single coastal city, and even on lake cities as England, because it is a half-cost district, and you can lower the cost of that even more with veterancy, which will give you another 30% production towards encampment and harbor districts, as well as the buildings inside those districts. So you'll be able to build your harbors, your lighthouse, your shipyard, and your seaports faster, giving you access to more resources. And since you're also accumulating resources faster than everyone else, you'll have an absolutely absurd amount of strategic resources, no matter the part of the game. You'll be able to have a bigger, more advanced armies, fleets, power plants, nukes, or space projects. than anyone else in this game with the ability, and this is only part of her strength. You also get 100% production towards military engineers, who also receive additional +2 build charges. That means these guys go from 2 charges to 4, which is really nice, since it makes them a little bit more viable to slap down forts, build short roads, or finish non-specialty districts, such as your aqueducts, your canals, and your dams. Also the flood barriers. These guys can be really, really useful in saving all of your coastal cities from the inevitable floods that happen when you burn all the coal in your industrial zones. Now, if you do the math, you can spend 1 of the builder charges to do 20% of an engineering district. So for instance, if you have a dam that you really need to finish, normally that means you would need 2.5 military engineers just to finish 1 dam, if you're not including the city's production itself. However, with 100% production, you can build 2 military engineers for the price of 1, each of them with double the charges. When one civ spent 170 production to get 2 builder charges, you spend 170 production to get 8 builder charges. That means you can get 160% the production cost of an engineering district, or basically more than half of 2 dams, when someone else could really only get about 40% or less than half a dam built. That makes these military engineers incredibly viable as England, so they can build a lot of infrastructure with you, in addition to laying down railroads or normal roads, as well as a bunch of other things they can do. You can also use military engineers to chop down features with these build charges, so you can chop for wonders or to clear spots for districts, or just to get general food and production throughout your empire. There's actually something really interesting about military engineers, and that their production cost does not scale throughout the game like builders do. So if your builders ever get to the point where they're more expensive than a military engineer, or you just want to save on the cost of your builders later down the line, buy military engineers out of your armories instead of builders. They'll have 4 charges instead of just the baseline 3 of builders, so you can use military engineers when you need chops, but you don't want to run the serfdom card. And then you can have these guys run around, chop out a bunch of features, maybe build a couple extra roads and or forts at choke points if you need, finish a couple of extra engineering districts. The viability of military engineers goes way up, not just doubled. It's like 4 times the more viable when you play as England than a normal military engineer, which most of the time are almost useless except for like building railroads because it doesn't use a build charge. Military engineers are really, really good as England. You also get a 20% production boost towards industrial zone buildings. Now this is a nice little boost and you want to build some industrial zones in your empire, but for base England, this isn't really enough of a synergy to make you want to build industrial zones in every single one of your cities. As we discussed in our previous Germany video, industrial zones are utilized best when they start with at least some base adjacency. You can utilize the iron and coal strategic resources that you start out with from your spawn bias, and you would also want your industrial zones spaced out around your empire so that you have at least 1 IZ hitting every single city to get the most out of the power and factory bonuses. And trust me, you'll want to prioritize this bonus as it's arguably the most powerful part of her kit. So buildings that provide an additional yield when powered receive +4 of their respective yields. For instance, let's talk about the first powered building you get access to in the game, which is the factory. A factory is a really good building, not only because it provides production to the city that's built it, but it actually provides production to all city centers within 6 tiles of the industrial zone that it's built. You'll notice this production starts at 3 production, but you get an additional 3 production to a total of 6 production if the city is powered. So after you build the power plant in your factory. So when you unlock factories, you also unlock the coal power plant. So as soon as you build your factory, you can immediately build a coal power plant. With England, you have a production bonus into building these buildings, so you should get them online faster, as well as access to the coal to actually power the power plant, which you should also be accumulating faster than everyone else, because remember, Workshop is the world's first part of their ability, which means you'll probably be the very first civ to get power online, especially because you'll be researching the top of the tech tree for naval superiority anyway, which means industrialization is right there. But if you do power it, this +3 building becomes +6 production, and that is applied to all cities within 6 tiles. So for instance, if you look at this little empire I have here, we have a nice centrally located city of Liverpool, which if we look at the city overlap, you can see that this tile right here where this industrial zone is hits 6 cities. We can even use the range finder to see which cities it's hitting, and that's 6 cities. If we take Johannesburg, it would actually be 7 cities. So this single building is providing 6 production to 6 cities. That means that this single building is providing a total of 36 production. It's really hard to look at anywhere in the game to see an example of a building that provides so much production, but factories are very, very good. Now, as England, since we have the additional 4 production on top of that, this factory doesn't provide 6 production, it provides 10 production. That's 10 production to 6 cities for a total of 60 production. 60 production, and this isn't a fully optimized setup. You could very easily have a setup where you have about 8 cities overlapping with a single industrial zone, which means you could have a building, just a single building that costs 330 production, and as soon as you build it, we'll be providing 10 production to a local 8 city network, which means you'll be getting 80 production per turn from a single building. You'll notice the factory only costs 330 production, which remember, as England, we get a 20% production boost to this. So you'll notice it really only costs about 264 production. That pays itself off in a little bit over 3 turns. And then it's net profit from there. You can get these factories so fast and so much production in a local area, especially if you prioritize just your centrally located industrial zones. You don't need IZs on like the far end of your empire. This really doesn't do anything for you, especially since factory production doesn't stack with other industrial zones in the area, which is why, unless you're Aegistine Victoria, one centrally located industrial zone is fantastic. Or if you're running Magnus vertical integration, at that point you can probably stack a few industrial zones around a Magnus like capital or something, and then you have a lot of production. This ability is incredibly strong, and that's only just the industrial zone. Actually, most special districts have at least one building that is boosted by power. You'll notice that the coal power plant itself and all power plants actually aren't boosted by power. That's why the tier 2 building in the industrial zone is boosted by power. Most other districts, it's a tier 3 building. So if we look at our campus, the tier 3 building is the research lab. Research labs provide 3 science and an additional 5 when powered to a total of 8. If you're England, this 8 science becomes 12 science per turn when powered. Your theater squares also have a tier 3 building that is boosted by power, the broadcast center, which provides 2 culture but additional 4 when powered, so 6 culture per turn. This becomes 10 culture per turn when it's powered. And then for the commercial hub, there is the stock exchange, which only provides 4 gold, but when powered provides an additional 7 gold per turn, to a total of 11 gold per turn. With England, this is actually 15 gold per turn. And remember, this is before factoring in the science, gold, culture, or production bonus from city-state. So remember, when we have a level 2 relationship with a city-state, you'll get additional 2 production to your factories. At level 3 with science, you get 3 science to research labs, you get 6 gold to stock exchanges, and 3 culture to broadcast centers. So essentially, England's ability is like having a level 3 relationship with a certain type of city-state in all of your powered specialty districts. Even the aerodrome has a building that is boosted by power. It's called, of course, the airport, which provides production, but it provides an additional 2 production when it's powered. Actually becomes a total of 10 production to a city. You'll notice that entertainment complexes and water parks are also boosted by power, and then that their stadium gets a little bit of a boost. These act a little bit differently though, and they're not actually boosted by England's power, because you'll see here their main yield is amenities and tourism. You can see you get 1 amenity from entertainment for the stadium, but if it's powered, you get an additional 2, and you do generate tourism from the stadium itself, but again, amenities and tourism are not boosted by power. They're not one of the base yields like food production, gold, science, culture, and faith. So here, just showing you water parks that can build the aquatic center boosted by power, which gives you additional amenities. But if this gave you an additional 4 amenities from power, that would be ridiculous. There's a bunch of specialty districts that don't consume any power at all because their tier 3 building does not. For example, the harbor's seaport doesn't consume any power. The military academy in the encampment doesn't consume any power, as well as preserves, government plazas, diplo quarters. They don't consume any power, so they don't have any type of boost from England's power ability. This is a big reason why I usually ignore religion as England. Yes, religion can have its benefits. Since holy sites do not have any synergies with Workshop of the Worlds, I generally try to prioritize districts that do. So after I build my harbor and my, government districts, I'm gonna be spamming out campuses, industrial zones, theater squares, at least one entertainment complex, of course, for, things like Coliseum. You'll notice there's even one engineering district that is boosted by power, the neighborhood. So both the food market provides additional food when powered. So generally it's +6 food, but with England it becomes +10, as well as the shopping mall, which provides 2 gold, another 2 gold when powered. So normally 4 gold, it becomes 8 gold per turn. But when you power this becomes 12 gold per turn. Again, notice it doesn't boost the amenities or the tourism modifiers. But what it does mean is that I will generally build more neighborhoods as England than I would with other civs. Of course, you run into other issues with the AI sending spies and spawning rebels if you build neighborhoods. So on a DD game, I'm still not building them very often. Maybe I'll build one breathtaking neighborhood for some era score, and then I'll throw a nice food market in it to get additional 10 food in my Pangala city. Is generally a really good shout. But in a multiplayer game, I'll build a ton of neighborhoods just because that's a lot of fun. On top of that, England is usually a civ where you're stacking the production bonus from 2 different districts that give you production. That being, of course, the industrial zone and the harbor itself. Because if you don't know, the shipyard gives you bonus production equal to the adjacency of your harbor, as well as +1 production on all coastal tiles. So you'll see we get +1 production on these tiles, as well as more production from the harbor, from the shipyard itself, meaning we're getting production from IZ and from harbors. So the moment that we get to our coal power plant, we'll get production equal to the adjacency of our industrial zone. And with the shipyard, we get production equal to the adjacency of our harbors. So you'll probably want to run the 100% adjacency to harbor districts, as well as the 100% adjacency to industrial zones when you get each of those buildings online. The combination of accumulating more coal per turn, half-cost harbors, production bonus to industrial zones, more production from that power when you build the coal power plant, which gives you production equal to the adjacency of your industrial zone, as well as the shipyard giving you production equal to the adjacency of the Royal Navy dockyard, and both of those adjacencies are doubled by policy cards. England gets a wicked amount of production that rivals the likes of civs with the unique industrial zones like Germany and the Gaul. I've seen games where England has completely outperformed the production ramp of Germany throughout the majority of the game. Stack on top of that the yield boost with powers of the overwhelming stockpile advantage. England is one of the strongest late game civs and someone not to be trifled with at all. England's also a really good civ in terms of getting very, very fast early gold. You can see here we have 3 cities with 3 harbors, which means all of these cities are making a good amount of gold per turn because each of these harbors are generating at least 3 gold per turn. But also trade routes do better over the water, but since they have a coastal spawn bias, they also have better trade routes because of it. You can see here we have an example where we have a land trade route to the Dutch here, which is making 3 gold and 1 faith. You can see it's making 3 gold because we are trading with a city center, and then 1 faith because we're trading with a holy site. However, if you look at this sea trade route to Auckland, this is generating 6 gold. The reason being is that I'm trading with a city center, so we get 3 gold from districts in Auckland. Then we also get additional 3 gold from landmarks along the path that make the trade route easier, like water. So as you can see, trading across water tiles actually doubles the original gold per turn that you're making in these trade routes and makes them incredibly useful for some early game tempo. England also has a massive advantage on the seas and can contend with the likes of other naval powers like Spain, who gets early fleets and armadas, Portugal with nows that get a free promotion, which instantly gives them a +7 combat strength advantage, Norway with their longships, and the Dutch with their unique frigates. And that's because of 2 reasons. First, the Royal Navy dockyard we can actually talk more about. Yes, it's a half-cost harbor, and this means that you can get 3 harbors down really fast, meaning that they are first to start raking in the gold and great admiral points for harbors. Since they're half-cost, you generally can settle 3 cities on the coast and start with 3 3 really early harbors. Each of these harbors actually give you 2 admiral points instead of the normal 1. So just like Byzantium's holy sites give you an additional great profit point per turn, which helps you secure religion, England can secure the early admiral points. So when you build 3 cities, all of them on the coast, each of them starting with a half-cost harbor, meaning that your districts will be built before anyone else, you're going to start with 6 admiral points per turn from the start of the game when no one else has any. You'll note that great admirals actually don't boost galleys because galleys are a ancient era unit, and your very first admirals will be boosting classical era and medieval era units. So you could use these admirals to boost your quadriremes, though quadriremes are generally pretty weak. So I generally just use them for their actual retire abilities. These can be anything from getting a free promotion on a naval unit, getting a free early fleet, which means you can actually get fleets before Spain can with these admirals. You can instantly create quadriremes and also production towards naval units, which can be useful later if you go for frigate timing. You can get a free naval melee unit with additional movement. You can then combine this with the promotion. If you're really good, you can combine the free naval melee units that gives additional movement with the free promotion and the free fleet to make a really strong early naval unit in the game that no one can contend with, not even Spain. The free promotions, of course, the +1 sight range and be able to travel ocean early with Leif Erikson, more pillage rewards, envoys, more pillage rewards, Francis Drake, of course, being great for plundering sea trade routes, early armadas, early ironclads. At this point in the game, you'll want to keep some of the admirals around to be boosting your caravels and your quadriremes or frigates, of course, and do a really nasty caravel attack. But then these just keep getting better. Instant battleships, instant suzerain of a city-state, less war weariness, more loyalty, naval raider production, which of course will then synergize with the second part of your ability. So not only are you getting more admirals than anyone else, but also you get +1 movement to all naval units that you build in your Royal Navy dockyard. So England can have an early monopoly on admirals, as well as faster ships than anyone else in the world, which contends very well, especially in the early game, while other people have their unique sea units. Then of course, you have your own unique sea unit somewhere in the mid-game called the Sea Dog. Your Sea Dog is unlocked at mercantilism, so in the Renaissance era with caravels and frigates, but it's unlocked in the culture tree. It's a replacement for the privateer. Now, the privateers in general are the representation of naval piracy, often sponsored by naval powers throughout the Renaissance era, and as such, they specialize in swooping in, pillaging and plundering a bunch of rewards, and then swooping out, just like as a lot of pirates did back in the Renaissance era. To facilitate that, they are actually stealth units that cannot be seen by the enemy. There's only 2 things that I've found actually reveals them. And you can send them up and down coastlines, pillaging a bunch of pillages and just getting a lot of value out of ruining the enemy's tiles, and they actually won't be seen. The Civilopedia here says that city centers and encampments actually reveal your sea dogs. However, through my testing, I found this actually isn't true. I just rolled the turn over here, and I did not get shot by the city of Karlstad because they cannot see my privateer. What will reveal, though, is if there's any unit inside of Karlstad. Now, that doesn't mean only military units. It also extends to civilian units like traders, builders, great generals, that sort of thing. So if there's a builder in the city, they will see my Sea Dog, and then the city will attack the Sea Dog. The other thing that reveals them is if you use their ranged attack on their cannons, then you will be seen. And then this guy's also revealed because this boat is here. So this guy just took damage because he just fired, but now he's back to being stealth and back to coastally raiding. The other thing that reveals Sea Dogs, of course, is other privateers, so keep an eye out for those, as well as the Destroyer, which is basically a late game anti-submarine melee boat. The best part is that you can get a lot of value without even worrying about taking any cities. So regardless of whether or not you want to expand, just declaring war, especially on these naval maps where you can just go sail around and pillage a whole lot of districts at any point, is incredibly valuable. The problem with most privateers is that they're not very good in naval warfare because they are weaker than frigates and they're very vulnerable to caravel attacks as well. However, the Sea Dog has a higher combat strength. You can see 55 versus the normal 50. They can actually capture defeated naval units. This makes Sea Dogs really good on the seas, especially in naval-to-naval combat, and the percentage likelihood that they will capture a naval unit is actually determined by the combat strength difference. So if you're stacking combat strength bonuses from the unit itself, as well as from admirals that you'll have a lot of, as well as fleets and armadas, and utilizing as much flanking as possible, you can actually capture a lot of enemy boats and really swing the tide of battle. So you can see all of these abilities and these unique units and districts really make England a powerhouse to be feared, especially on naval heavy maps, but even on very land focused Pangea normal type of maps. Now, and you'll note England now has 4 leaders, which, you know, is just one lower than the most, which is China that has 5. And in my opinion, this is absolutely fantastic. I love how Civ 6 has introduced multiple leaders for the same civilization, because in previous titles like Civ 5, you only got 1 leader per Civ, which means you had to wait till the next Civ title to get any more representation for our entire civilization. Each of these leaders lean into the very generalist, heavy production playstyle that is England, but takes it in a slightly different direction, which I think is very fun, because you have slightly different playstyles, but they all still feel uniquely like England. Victoria, Age of Empire is who everyone normally thinks about when we talk about England. This is, of course, our baseline and basically the abilities that you'll be losing out on when you try out the new leaders. But every time a first city is founded on another continent other than England's home continent, you grant a free melee unit in that city, and you get +1 trade route capacity. Building a Royal Navy dockyard also grants you a free naval unit, and you gain the Redcoat unique unit with military science. So this means in addition to all of the great admirals that you will have a free navy right at the start of the game before anyone else does, which means you can very quickly establish some naval superiority, especially with the other synergies that we were talking about before. The Redcoat specifically is a line infantry replacement. They have no movement cost to disembark and 10 combat strength when fighting on a continent other than England's capital. They have a higher combat strength as well. These guys are bad news. You also unlock them right here in the industrial era, right after your power spike has really started to kick off after you picked up industrialization, which means you can do a lot of damage with these redcoats. These are to be feared by everyone, which is fantastic because you get them for free when you settle on a new continent. So that either means they can be used as defensive units against barbarians, against a landmass that has not been settled yet in the game, or you could forward settle towards another enemy's cities that you want to take, and then take their cities with these redcoats and a few other units. Like, it's incredibly viable and a lot of fun to play. It's because of these redcoats and the free melee units, as well as the free trade routes, which increase your gold capacity, that I think that Victoria, Age of Empire is a very strong contender for a domination bend on England. Free melee units, more gold to support those units, and then a bunch of production boosts, as well as general boosts to all types of districts that you will be conquering, means she is incredibly strong in the late game, and why I like to play her that direction. Now, if Victoria Age of Empire is a go out and dominate your enemies type of civ, Victoria Age of Steam is a sit back home and sim like you've never simmed before. You know how we said England was already one of the strongest production civs in the game? Maybe stronger than Germany in certain setups? Well, Victoria Age of Steam just goes absolutely ballistic. 10% production in cities for each industrial zone building in that city. That means that's a maximum of 30% production in a city. Percentage modifiers are incredibly strong. Incredibly strong, especially when you stack this on top of certain bonuses like amenities, which is 20%, and Kilwa, which can be another 30%, and Ruhr Valley, which can be another 20%. So the amount of percentage modifiers you can get with Victoria Age's team is absolutely ballistic. This is pretty late into the game, so it is a very late game production boost. But remember, you do have a little bit of benefits in order to get to industrialization fast, which includes wanting to go the naval top end of the tech tree, which means you'll probably be the first one here. You can build these buildings faster as England, so you'll have a 20% production boost towards these buildings, and each time you build one, you're going to start building them faster and faster because you're going to get a 10, 20, and 30% production boost. Now, that is pretty much in the mid to later part of the game, so this won't affect you till then. However, the 2 production to all strategic resources is also just bonkers. This is some good tile yields. Look at here at this horse tile. This should be a 3-2 tile. It's a 3-4 tile. Now remember, this is also improved, but it's a 2 production to strategic resources. You don't need to improve the tile at all. Like I rolled this map just to show you, like, look at this. It's turn 11. We have a 3-3 tile, and this tile's not even improved yet. This is so good. 3 food, 3 production? Hello? From the very start of the game? Like, think about it. What's defined as like the staple for a good spawn is these 2 food, 2 production tiles. This is 3 food, 3 production. That's 50% more food and production than a normal 2-2 tile. Like, that's just incredibly good tempo. It's incredibly good tempo. If, for instance, if we spawn on a Plains Hill, like this Plains Hill here, we had 2 production in the capital, we had 2 production in the palace, and then we were working a horse tile that had a 2-2, but then it had also an additional 2 production on top of it. It's essentially a 50% increase in production from the start of the game. This ability is fantastic. That, of course, relies on you actually revealing and finding strategic resources, which means you'll want to prioritize settling more strategics. But this is so good. Now you improve this and you get another production. This is a 3-4 tile at the start of the game. That's absolutely insane. A pantheon that works really well with her, of course, is God of Craftsman, because you get +1 production and 1 faith on your improved strategic resources, which will then take this to a 3-5-1 tile. That's absolutely insane. The amount of early tempo you can get out of a game like this. Look at that! Now, you could actually even settle on the strategic resources if you want to get that extra production boost in your city center, but it won't synergize with God of Craftsman if you want to go that route. You could totally just settle on the tiles if you have a different pantheon. You also want to try to settle iron as soon as you can so that you can get the additional production from these resources. You're also going to accumulate the iron faster, which means you can sell it to the AI, as well as get even more stockpile by building those Royal Navy dockyards. Aegis Team Victoria is also the exception to the rule we were talking about before in terms of building industrial zones. Before, I mentioned you want to build probably just 1 industrial zone in the center of your empire to hit all of your cities. However, with Victoria Aegis Team, that percentage modifier is definitely plenty enough to make you want to get industrial zones in every single one of your cities if you can, regardless of the actual adjacency on them. Some of them could focus on coal power plants if they have good adjacencies like this +7. Other of them could focus on oil power plants, which give only 3 production, but that's better than the adjacency on some of these IZs. And also, you might not have enough coal for all of these guys. But for instance, if you have like a +1 industrial zone here, that's a good contender for an oil power plant. That will give 3 production to the city and to cities nearby that don't have a power plant. And then you can upgrade that to a nuclear power plant later on, which is 4 production and 3 science to all local cities that don't already have a power plant. All of this makes Victoria Aegis Team an incredible, probably the best science victory civ in the game nowadays. You have a combination of huge production bonuses from the start, huge production percentage modifiers. You can combine the 30% with Revali, with Kilwa. Actually, I challenge you to find all of the production modifiers that you can to make Victoria an incredible science civ. You can just bang out the late game projects. You can also use a good amount of warfare, especially coastal raiding with horror sea dogs to boost her through the tech and civic trees to really trim down the turn counter for her final victory. I do really want to quickly talk about Eleanor as well, English Eleanor, because she does present an actually pretty interesting way to play England, which is a very culture-focused England. So Eleanor has bonuses to great works. Each great work in her cities causes foreign cities within 9 tiles to lose 1 loyalty. Any foreign city that leaves its civilization due to loss of loyalty and is receiving the most loyalty pressure from Eleanor instantly joins her empire, becoming a free city. Now, admittedly, this is the weakest synergy in the England kit. However, it does still synergize with Workshop of the World, in that when you get your cities powered, you'll get culture on your broadcast centers that you're building in your theater squares, as well as the amount of production modifiers that you're going to have through your Royal Navy dockyards, your industrial zones, your shipyards. All of those will help you build a bunch of late game wonders that have more great work slots. And then you can also spend a lot of production on projects for more great works. So again, admittedly, it would be much better if you could play Eleanor with the British Museum, but the production modifier for Wonder Spam, really strong broadcast centers and neighborhoods with shopping malls is something notable and an interesting new way to play as England. Most of the Englands are probably going to build harbors first and then lead into campuses, while this Eleanor, you're going to lead into theater squares before you stop up to industrial zones. And then there's Elizabeth I coming back from Civ 5 and her trade agreements with England. You can see her leader bonus, Drake's Legacy, essentially means that she gets gold online the fastest of all of the Englands. You get additional 2 trade route capacity when you get your first grade admiral. As we had discussed, you get your admiral very fast, so these trade routes come online very quickly. And then trade routes to city-states gain plus 3 gold for every specialty district at the origin city. And this is going to function similarly to Pachacuti, who gets additional food for every mountain tile in the origin city on their trade routes if they're domestic. However, this is England, you're going to be wanting to trade internationally, but specifically with city-states. So we can see right here is a really good example of Elizabeth's ability in action. You can see this is our normal trade route to a city center. It's 3 gold. It's not being duplicated by anything. You can see if we're trading with Alex up here across the water, that plus 3 gold is being doubled. But you can see here, I can do a land trade route to Lahore, which is 3 gold from the city center here, and then 3 gold from our own bonus of having our own district here. And then we can get the best of everything by trading with a city-state across water. So the 3 gold returned from the district is being doubled, and then we have an additional 3 gold from our own district. It's lots of gold very early on in the game, and it can create a lot of tempo. To get the most out of the ability, you're going to want to have high population cities so that you can place as many districts down as possible. So you can implement a lot of the things that we talked about in our videos about Tokugawa and Yongle in order to get massive food bonuses. Those, of course, include a lot of early wonders, like the Temple of Artemis. Getting extra food and housing and amenities will help your cities grow quite a lot, as well as Hanging Gardens can help you with the speed of your growth as long as you have the housing to accommodate that. You'll want to extra prioritize your lighthouses on your coastal cities because they will give you the extra housing and more food on coastal tiles, as well as that trade route that you're going to be looking for to be able to trade with the city-states. You can also try to use Magnus. Here I did do provision to maintain the population in my capital so that I could keep on building districts. Surplus logistics will also be good for growth in one of your cities. However, you won't be using the +2 food for domestic trade routes since you're going to be trading internationally. You can see here in this example, we have our city of London that's been growing super tall, focused on a lot of early food. And the city of Liverpool was another huge city. And between these 2 cities, we're able to send a bunch of trade routes to a bunch of city-states, each of them generating us lots of gold and faith. You also want to prioritize building your diplomatic quarter as soon as possible. This will give you a ton of envoys so you can choose a lot of the local city-states. This will become incredibly important when you get to the points of the game to run Visselbanken at diplomatic service. You can see here we're running Visselbanken, even though the mod doesn't show the food and production we're getting from trading with a ally or with a vassal city-state. You can see here on these trade routes that are going to my city-states, we get 2 food and 2 production and which means you can get a lot of food production and gold and faith on your trade routes. Most certainly keep an eye out for the city-state Kumasi. You'll notice that Kumasi's suzerain bonus is that your trade routes to city-states provide 2 culture and 1 gold for every specialty district in the origin city. You'll notice it's the exact same wording as Elizabeth's ability, which means it's a direct synergy. Every time you build a district in your origin city, you'll get additional 2 culture and 1 gold, which means you can get an absolute bonkers amount of culture and gold and just straight synergy on Elizabeth's ability. You'll probably want to run monarchy, especially since you want to be generating the extra 50% influence points, which is how you earn envoys for suzerain city-states. Of all the city-states that you're suzerain of, you're going to be earning a lot of diplomatic favor. That is because every time you're suzerain of a city-state, you earn 1 diplo favor point per turn per city-state. And this can be actually increased if you build the Orzagaj. With all the extra gold that you have, you should be able to afford sending delegations to other players as well. That will actually give you more diplomatic favor for every delegation that you have sent after you build your diplomatic quarter. This is why I feel like Elizabeth can do diplomatic victory very, very well, more than the other Englands. So if you're a peaceful player and you want to go for diplomatic victory, Elizabeth is a decent option, but definitely not a super obvious choice. Another way to play her, of course, is going the opposite direction and go back to a type of aggressive domination victory, especially because you get 100% yield from plundering trade routes. Your sea dogs will be very, very useful in plundering all of the land nearby. And since you have so much gold and strategic resources, you can afford a absolutely massive navy. Lots of admirals, go on an archipelago map and just go absolutely crazy, conquering the whole world, building Venetian arsenal, and just having a lot of fun with her. Also, since you're trading with city-states, you actually don't need any friends. You don't need other civs to like you. All of your trade routes will be going to city-states. So you'll be getting tons of gold, culture, food, production, everything you need to sim well. You don't need a trade partner or an ally to do so. So domination victory, incredibly good with her as well. Also, bonus points if you're able to grab Francis Drake, who gives additional rewards for plundering sea trade routes on top of Drake's legacy. Of course, this is named after the same person. And then also grab Qingxi as well for more rewards from plundering trade routes. So in your next England game, there's a few things you're going to want to look out for. I would recommend going for Naval husbandry first, especially if your age is themed Victoria, to find horses so you know where good settlements are. It also gives you a little more time to boost astrology because you're going to come up through sailing astrology up to celestial navigation. You can build 3 harbors on 3 coastal cities. This will open up a couple of discounted districts. I generally will go for campuses for most of the Englands, unless you're playing as English Eleanor, of course. You'll probably be hitting Government Plaza at this point and going up to political philosophy. At this point, I like picking up mining and heading up to the diplomatic quarter to get envoys for city-states, especially as Elizabeth. You'll want to get your lighthouses built as soon as possible to get the trade routes and the additional food and housing in your coastal cities. Keep an eye out for the card veterancy to help you build your harbors faster, as well as being able to build a mausoleum of Holocarnassus very quickly into the game. If you have, for instance, Imhotep as your first engineer, Imhotep can build a mausoleum very quickly, and then also give you 2 other wonders. I like building the Colosseum in a central location in my empire, somewhere close to where my industrial zones will be going as well as a couple of theater squares between the 2, between the wonder and the entertainment complex. And then your last charge for Imhotep can probably go to something like Colossus to give you another trade route, more gold, and something that you'll be unlocking anyway, since you're coming up here for shipbuilding to start settle more islands. As Victoria Age of Empire, you're going to want to prioritize settling on a new continent, while Victoria Age of Steam, you're going to want to prioritize settling your cities in a good cluster around a bunch of industrial zones and your Colosseum, and just sim as well as possible. For Eleanor, you'll probably pick up theater squares before going for Colosseum and your mausoleum, because you're going to want to get these as soon as you can. Lumber mills are a really good pickup, especially on flat wooded tiles, so that you can get the boost for the shipyards later down down the line. After you have your lumber mills, you can go straight up to cartography. You don't even need to grab apprenticeship, though you could if you think that is beneficial for you, especially to get your industrial zones online. But at this point, you're going to decide between going for industrial zones and mine improvements and getting a little bit of a sim going, and going for caravels to attack someone incredibly early. If you're Victoria Age of Steam, you're going to want to get bronze working sooner than later so you can get your access to your iron. And you also want to grab the Kilwa Kisawani if you can, since it's just always a fantastic wonder, especially if you're going for heavy envoys to the city-states. At this point, you'll be hitting feudalism and monarchy, so you'll be able to generate more influence points for more city-state envoys. You can decide whether or not you want to go for an alliance. Keep an eye out for naval tradition, since you get the 100% adjacency with your harbors here, which will increase the production of your shipyards, as well as guilds, craftsmen. The 100% adjacency to your industrial zones will be really big. I like to go for Merchant Republic in most of my England games, unless you're Elizabeth and you really want envoys, and then come up here for your sea dogs as you're unlocking Niter and your frigates. After that, you're going to want to come up to industrialization to get more production on your mines, as well as to unlock your factories and your industrial zones. If you're going for a science game, especially with Age of Steam, I would try to get Ruhr Valley, as well as picking up Oxford University. These are two really big modifiers in a science game. Also, keep an eye out for other city-states like Mogadishu, which will make your traders on the water unable to be pillaged. Keep an eye out for Mexico City, which will extend the regional effect of your industrial zones to hit more cities and get more out of your power buff. And then Cardiff, who gives 2 power to all your harbor buildings. 2 power is actually enough to power your factories, which means the moment that you build a factory in a city that has a harbor, it will be instantly powered, and all of your local cities will start getting the full production boost from your factories. Then come down here for printing for the diplomatic visibility, as well as the Forbidden Palace if you want it. At this point, you'll be hitting line infantry, and if you're Age of Empire, you have access to redcoats. Definitely take advantage of these guys. They're incredibly strong if you attack someone else's continent, and they just absolutely annihilate cities. And all of the late game stuff completely depends on what victory condition you're going for. If you're going for a culture victory, of course, Christo, Broadway, and a bunch of wonder spam. If you're going for a science victory, you're going to want to try to find a spot for the Munch and Scott research station. And if you're going for domination, you're just gonna, just have fun, just taking everything. Thanks for hanging in with me for this whole video. It was a long one for sure, and it definitely is out late, but hopefully you learned something. If you learned even one thing this video, make sure you comment down below what you learned, or just leave a comment to the Goddess of Algorithms Pantheon. It really does help out the channel. Also, if you want to follow me on Twitch, I stream here every Monday, Wednesday, and sometimes Fridays. We've been doing a bunch of silly games. This is actually gameplay of our all game modes challenge, and it's absolutely ridiculous. So if you want to be a part of there, go ahead, hang out on Twitch at whiteandnerdytv, and I hope to see you there.